Amanda from Pontes Books here with another video for The Prince and the Pauper, Chapter 3. So today we're taking a look at another fun fact. And this fun fact comes from the fact that in Chapter 3, this is where Tom and Edward, our Prince and our Pauper, meet for the first time. And while they're meeting, they kind of share both a desire to have a life that's different from the one that they have. And as part of that conversation, they decide to switch outfits. And after they switch outfits, they realize how incredibly similar that they look. And even they themselves cannot deny it. So that phenomenon is something that we refer to as a doppelganger. So a doppelganger is our fun fact for today, exploring more about that term, what it means in real life, I guess. So a doppelganger is a German word. So it comes from the German language, and it means double goer or double walker. But the way that we actually really use it, in English at least, is a person who looks exactly or very similar to you, but is not actually related to you. So it's kind of a crazy concept, but it comes up again and again. Strangers who look like twins. So one of the doppelganger studies that has been done is by someone named Tegan Lucas, who is an anthropologist at the University of New South Wales. And she actually published this study in 2015 in the International Journal of Legal Medicine. So to do her study, she actually had photographs of people. I believe it was, they were military photographs. And what she did is she compared 8 different facial and 8 different body measurements in these photographs of people. So some examples of the things that she measured: the length of your ear, the circumference of your head, the distance between your left and right pupil. So those are some examples of the facial features that she was comparing. And then she had body measurements as well that she was comparing, all using those photographs. So from that study of looking at those photographs, she found that the odds of an exact match in those 8 facial features, so all 8 of them matching between 2 different people, is 1 in a trillion, which is pretty slim. Basically, that translates to a 1 in 135 chance that there's a single pair of doppelgangers with those shared facial traits on the planet. So 1 in 135 chance, and then the chances of actually meeting them are even lower than that, because you don't necessarily come into contact with everybody on the planet, obviously. So then she went further and looked at what would the odds be of an exact match in the body measurements, not just the face, and that was 1 in a quintillion, which is 1 with 15 zeros. So that's crazy different. But when we think about doppelgangers, most of the time we're talking about the face, not necessarily the entire body matching that similarly. So a couple notes about this study, and these are things that were acknowledged. So body measurements are much more unique than facial features, as seen by the odds of finding someone with an exact body match as opposed to an exact face match. And in this study, they were looking at exact matches. But if you're thinking about a computer recognizing whether 2 things are exact versus the human eye, things can look very similar even if they aren't exactly the same. So people can still have very similar faces without it having being an exact match. So if you look at that original statistic of how likely it was to have 2 people with an exact face match, it's more likely that people will have faces that are similar enough to recognize that they look almost the same, because the program that she used was using facial recognition software rather than just human perception. Still really interesting though. So the odds aren't great, but if you think about just like how similar people look, it gets a little bit more promising. So there are some other experts on the subject as well. Francis Brunel started a project that's called I'm Not a Lookalike. So he's actually a photographer, and so he would bring people in. I think they would send their pictures in first, and then if he thought that they looked similar enough, he'd bring them in and have a photo shoot with the 2 of them. And he said sometimes when he would bring these doubles in, they couldn't even recognize the resemblance. Like he would be looking at them and he'd think that they looked very, very similar, but they couldn't see it. But he did find and commented that he thought people would bond pretty instantly with their doubles because they shared something in common, right? That face. Another expert, Nick Feeler, so he was a statistician involved in the computer-aided facial recognition project. And so he commented in talking about how there are only so many genes that get combined to determine different elements of your face, so that it's inevitable that there's going to be doubles in the world with faces, because there's just so many different, only so many combinations of genes that you can have. And he said that if you have kind of an average face with no features that are very unique, you are definitely more likely to have a face match. But if you have a truly unique face, then you might not necessarily be able to find one. But he says that most people probably do have a facial look-alike somewhere out there in the world. It's just whether or not, again, you meet them. And yet another one, Danielle Padini, is a forensic molecular biologist at George Washington University. And she also says that environment is very important. So even if identical twins were raised in different areas, different living conditions, they could look different. So the inverse then would also be true. If two people had different genes but were raised in the same area, had the same type of lifestyle, they might start to look sort of similar, even if their genes don't necessarily match. So there was this cool thing that is still going on, actually, that was called the Twin Stranger Project. So originally it was started by 3 friends in Ireland, Niamh, Terence, and Harry, who set out to, kind of as a competition between the 3 of them, to all find their doppelganger, to find their twin stranger. So they put information out on social media, they put pictures out, and they said, please help me find my twin. And 28 days was the original length of their challenge. And Niamh, the one who's photographed here, actually ended up finding 3 different doppelgangers. And she did videos with them where she went and met them. And she actually, with one of them, they did a DNA test where they found that the DNA showed that they weren't related, even really distantly. So they just had very similar facial features. So that was an interesting thing. They still have a website that you can go to, and I'll include it it's twinstrangers.com, but I'll include it in the blog post that goes along with this one as well, that people can post their pictures and try and see if they have a twin stranger, a doppelganger. So again, since there were some different studies and things referenced today, I have some references to go along with it. But otherwise, that's it for today.